Hello and welcome to the Blitz Talk Show, a bi-weekly talk show where we talk about major news in the previous week in the NFL. Week 14 wrapped up this past weekend, so let's get to some of our takeaways. We'd now like to welcome our longtime NFL fan and NFL analyst for this week, Aaron Heyman. Aaron, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Now let's get right into it. Let's start with the Chiefs and Dolphins game from this past weekend. Now the outcome of this game was no surprise with Kansas City beating the Dolphins 33-27 in Miami this past weekend. What may have been surprising is how competitive Miami was throughout the game, carrying the lead up until midway through the second quarter against the reigning Super Bowl champion Chiefs. The Dolphins were able to keep it close without the help of their starting running back Myles Gaskin, who was out due to injury, as well as no assistance from their star receiver Devontae Parker, who logged 2 targets with no catches in this game. Obviously, the Chiefs played amazing in this game. They played amazing football, but could the outcome have gone in favor of Miami if Devontae Parker and Myles Gaskin were able to play throughout the entire game?
Maybe. I think the defense showed that they're legit and show that they can be in those tough games. But, I mean, as much as those are really good playmakers, I don't know if that would really be enough. I think, if anything, that game scared all the other top contenders in the NFL because all it does is show that it doesn't really matter how the Chiefs start. If they get on a roll, no one can beat them. I think they did a really good job. The Dolphins did, keeping it close, forcing Mahomes make mistakes. But even coming off of 3 interceptions, it doesn't even matter to him. It's almost scary for the rest of the NFL how potent that offense is and how they can just come alive at any moment.
Exactly. Miami will certainly be a contender going into the playoffs. Now I want to turn to this Pittsburgh and Buffalo game from this past weekend on Sunday Night Football. Going into this matchup, the Steelers and Bills experts were about 50-50 on this outcome. Bills coming off a win in San Francisco, and the Pittsburgh Steelers were coming off the first loss of the season to the Washington football team. The real storyline here is regarding the question about the legitimacy of the Steelers' record, and especially after starting 11-0. We already knew Buffalo was a legitimate contender with Josh Allen consistently putting up spectacular numbers and their steady help from their number one receiver, Stephon Diggs, who put up another great game this past week with 10 receptions for 130 yards and a touchdown. Big question here is, are the Steelers still in the running to dethrone Kansas City for the AFC title?
Yeah, I think they're still in the running. They've got a great defense, and the offense can show that they can really, put up points really well. But it's looking less and less likely as it goes on. I had a feeling that they weren't really as good as their record showed. I think when they're playing some good defenses, just recently against Washington, who's very underrated defense, and the Bills, whose defense I also think is very underrated. They kind of show that they can be slowed down, especially Big Ben. The age is getting there. The receivers having trouble catching passes. Yes, they still are in contention, but compared to some other teams, I think they're really not in running with Kansas City right now.
Yeah, it's hard to be in running with Kansas City after they demolish almost every team they play. Now I want to look ahead to this next week, week 15. I want to look ahead to an upcoming matchup between the Cardinals and the Eagles, which not a lot of people might have been excited for. A week ago, this would have been obvious who we thought would win. After this past week, Jalen Hurts took over as the QB for the Eagles, and they look like a very different team. They managed to beat a great Saints team in a very surprising game, and many argue that the Saints are a much better team than Arizona. So is it fair to say that the Eagles could accomplish back-to-back upsets with a win this week against the Cardinals?
Yes, definitely. The team is, after you have a big win like that against the number one seed in the NFC with the new quarterback, a new young starting quarterback, it rejuvenates the team. Exactly. There's new life. Everyone was playing well. The defense was playing great. Miles Sanders was getting going. He was always had that potential. But just because the offense was so stagnant and not working, that he didn't really get going. But now, the team definitely has new life. The Cardinals struggle, with holding leads, and also with Kyler Murray sometimes decision making, and also being a young team like that. I think the Eagles can win this game. They're surprising how tough that bad NFC East is going to come down to, because I think while their record a couple steps behind Washington and the Giants, I think with how they're playing, they can still kind of be in that running to maybe sneak into that that top seed and maybe a playoff spot.
For sure, they could definitely sneak in. I want to look ahead to the playoffs. Let's start with the AFC. Let's look at the playoffs quickly and discuss some interesting scenarios. In the AFC, there are 5 teams who have essentially booked their ticket to the playoffs, being the Chiefs, Steelers, Bills, Titans, and Colts. We don't know how the AFC South will turn out, but looks like the Titans and Colts will both make the playoffs. With 2 spots left, who do you think will get those 2 spots in the AFC and why? Now, the odds are it's going to be between the Browns, Ravens, Dolphins, and the Raiders.
Mm-hmm. I think the Browns definitely have one of those spots. They've really looked great all year. I mean, that running game is almost impossible to stop. They can play good defense, enough to win games. And Baker Mayfield has shown that he can win games himself. The Ravens game was so close. They played so well. They battled. They fought hard. They didn't lose that game as much, way less than the Ravens won that game. I think they have almost, if they keep doing what they're doing, they can definitely, get a playoff spot. And then Miami has a pretty tough schedule ahead. They have to play
between Miami and Baltimore,
again.
You said?
Miami and Baltimore. Miami has a pretty tough schedule going ahead. They have to play the Patriots, Bills, and Raiders, while, the Ravens have a little bit of a lighter road ahead. So I think being that I think the Ravens, a little more experience, that they'll probably sneak into that last spot.
So you're going with Cleveland and Baltimore for the final 2 spots.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's very fair. And now turning to the NFC. Now it seems like in the NFC, we have another 5 teams that look like they're practically guaranteed to make the playoffs. In the Packers, Saints, Rams, Seahawks, and Buccaneers. The remaining 2 teams are going to come from the winner of the NFC East and then from the 3rd wildcard seed. Now, first talking about the NFC East, like you were mentioning before, the Washington football team is in first place in that division, currently at 6-7, Giants at 5-8, and the Eagles at 4-9. 4-9. So
4-8-1.
4-8-1, correct. Yes, 4-8-1 after the tie in Cincinnati in week 3. Thank you. So talking about the football team, they have Seattle, Carolina, and Philadelphia in the remaining weeks. What do you think their record will be in those remaining games?
I can see them. I can see them winning definitely at least one of those, and maybe 2. I don't think they beat Seattle this week. I think Seattle is kind of knowing that each game right now is a must-win game when they're in a really close battle in the NFC West. And just because how bad the offense looked against the Niners, I mean, the defense won that game completely. I mean, the offense couldn't get anything going. So I think that it is a pretty tough schedule. If the Eagles are still playing how they are, they're going to be fighting for that spot too. I maybe think that they only beat the Panthers, and kind of, stay at
7-9 to finish the season.
7-9.
Okay,
And what makes it interesting is that the Giants lost the Washington football team lost both of their games to the Giants, so they lose that tiebreaker. So it'll make things a lot more competitive.
They would. However, if Washington does win even one of their next 3 games, New York would have to win 2, and they are going against Cleveland, Baltimore, and Dallas to conclude the year. And it'd be very tough to get 2 wins against those 3 teams. So if you had to make a prediction in terms of the NFC East, would you say it goes to the football team, the Giants, or even possibly the Eagles?
I think Washington, I think they're in that position where they have a tough schedule like the Giants, but because they're that game ahead, and I mean, you can see them winning big games with their defense, that I think that they'll maybe just secure that final spot.
Yeah, that defense is certainly underrated. Now, as for the 7th seed in the NFC, it looks like a race between the Cardinals, Vikings, and Bears. Cardinals currently having that spot at 7-6, while the other teams, the Bears and the Vikings, are 6-7. Can the Cardinals keep their playoff spot, or will the Vikings or Bears catch up and steal the spot from them?
It's tough. I don't really see the Bears. I mean, this game this week, Vikings against Bears will be really important to see because the Vikings already beat the Bears before. I don't really think the Bears. I mean, Montgomery is running great, and Trubisky looked amazing, but I don't think that they really have enough to make it. I think it's really going to be between Minnesota and Arizona. And Arizona has a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they have to play the Eagles, like you said, and the Rams again, week 17. But the Vikings their defense has struggled a lot, and they don't look good enough to really secure that spot, even if they have to play, even if their record is a little bit easier. So I think Arizona maybe pull out a really tough win, whether it's week 17 against the Rams or this week against the Eagles, and get that last seed. Yeah,
it was really interesting to see from Minnesota in the 3/4 mark of the season. They seemed like they were on a roll, and now after losing to Tampa Bay in the way they did, and having to fight with the Bears and the Cardinals for that 7 seed. It's going to be difficult for them. All right, well, that concludes this episode of the Blitz Talk Show. We hope you enjoyed and would greatly appreciate if you drop a like and comment down below and give us a follow. Please subscribe to help us grow our channel even further. And happy holidays.